have an off day every now and then, and that goes for video game developers as well. For every 10 out of 10 bona fide classic your faves put out, there's probably something that slips through the cracks a little undercooked, kinda like Haze with Free Radical or Babylon's Fall with Platinum Games. How could the people behind Bayonetta make this? Well, stuff happens. I'm sure we've all had the displeasure of a favorite putting out something that ended up being a massive letdown despite their prestige or track record. Like, imagine being a huge Insomniac fan, you got your Ratchets, your Spyros, and Spider-Man, and if you squint a bit harder, you'll see Overstrike, or Fuse in the distance. Be they releases before the studio was famous, a rare misstep, or a straight up flop era, this one goes out to all the mistakes. So yo, it's Austin, and today we're gonna be diving into something a little different. We're talking about bad games by good developers. The rare missteps from video game devs that have otherwise been pretty solid. After all, as a wise man once said, they can't all be zingers. But to be fair, he also wrote a song called My Name is Mud. Primus sucks. But today we're gonna be doing things a little different. Each of these games are so different that I don't really have a way to tie them all together, nor would I really want to, because they're all worth talking about. What's a bad game from a developer that you like? Let me know down below. Just try not to say anything that I like. Is that fair? Probably not, but you know, I'm watching. I figure we might as well get this started with a game that you probably haven't played, but by a developer you most definitely recognize. Brought to you by the people behind the 3DO port of Samurai Showdown. Wait, that can't be right. Whiplash by Crystal Dynamics. Whiplash. No, not the 11 out of 10 film that's been distilled entirely down into the not my tempo meme. I'm talking about the video game. No doubt you already know about Crystal Dynamics. They've been around since the early 90s, putting out bangers and classics every few years. We got Gex, we got Legacy of Kain, Soul Reaver, and they'd eventually take on Tomb Raider and Marvel's Avengers, but generally Crystal Dynamics has been pretty solid throughout the decades. Prior to being thrown into the Tomb Raider tombs, they'd release a handful of original ideas of varying quality. Easily the strangest of the bunch, Whiplash. Officially endorsed by PETA, Whiplash. Yeah, this game. Whiplash is an interesting take on the buddy action platformer, your Ratchet and Clanks, Jak and Daxters, Rough Trigger Vanacore conspiracy, except treating all of that heart and soul for a wacky, zany edge. We are Spanx and Raymond, one of which was actually from the previous release, Mad Dash Racing. Well, I guess he got kidnapped and was sent to a laboratory for product testing under the incredibly evil mega corporation Genron. No relation. These dudes hate animals, like really hate animals. You got little guys hooked up to all sorts of machines as the narrator's like, haha, this is crazy. Animals are so dumb.
Don't you love it? Say you love it. Genron.
Whiplash has you control both the weasel and rabbit at the same time as they're chained together. The cover comes to fruition as you literally use Redmond as a weapon. Want to destroy something? Whiplash. Want to use a hover jump? Whiplash. Want to take advantage of fire elements in a crazy experimental laboratory? Whiplash? Overseas in the UK, the RSPCA took issue with Whiplash, stating that they were deeply shocked at the level of cartoonish cruelty depicted on screen, and Eidos was like, oh, we thought this would raise positive awareness among children. Considering one of the first text boxes that pops up states you have to save the monkeys from this unfunny gag, I'm not really sure what tone they were trying to grab here. It is like a little funny though.
You're out of your mind. Do you know what would happen if I freed all the animals?
We could make breakfast tacos.
Nope, can't do it.
Yo, I would have folded immediately. Other times, the humor is XD lol so random.
Remember the Alamo?
The Alamo.
How about the game though? I mean, that's what really matters, right? Well, if you had on your bingo card Janky Jak and Daxter clone, you'd be right. Everything in this game feels Whiplash has close to the bare minimum of interactives. It's got nice animations and a floaty feel to it, but you really just do be running up to people and mashing square and circle. It's visual noise, it's absurd, and you'll immediately turn your brain off in seconds. The platforming's oddly outdated as swinging from floating orbs to others, and every turret sequence is a battle against depth perception. Yo, this feels like all luck. When it comes down to it, 90% of the gameplay consists of smacking two 2 buttons, waiting for them to stop blocking, and then moving on to the next tight corridor. And there's a lot of tight corridors. You gotta run through these maps, which are mostly easy to parse, but other times you'll get confused due to how similar everything looks. I hope you're ready to jump over moving lasers, because you're gonna be doing that for all 14 hours of this thing. That is, if you decide to go for 100%. In order to truly break away from the evil company holding animals hostage, you have to destroy everything to literally bankrupt them. On the bottom of the screen. Apparently this whole mega corporation is only worth like 5 million? That's like what, a 2-bedroom apartment in San Francisco? So the story's kind of sus, the gameplay is okay, and the levels are all samey. Maybe the characters can save us. Or we can instead have the weasel be mute and the rabbit speak through a high-pitched filter.
In a world where a voice from the heavens tells you to cut loose. He's talking about like hash browns, right? What are you waiting for? Throw me at her!
Imagine Ren and Stimpy, but the whole thing is one character telling the other, hey, don't be so silly, while that silly one continues to be silly. And mute! And that's Whiplash. I do enjoy any time the Genron dudes are on screen, but those moments are so few and far between that what we're left with is a very empty feeling baby's first platformer, while being a pretty TT rating. Crystal Dynamics has some genuine hits before and after Whiplash, but this ain't it.
Ready to commence pain experiment 36?
Yeah, kids love this stuff. Whiplash, the perfect thing to play when you want to burn images into your brain that'll last a lifetime.
Stop it.
I wanted Whiplash to be a good time, and I think there was potential there, but it was kind of doomed right out of the gate. I say that, but Happy Tree Friends exists, so what do I know? One thing actually, and that's how to keep your internet passwords and information safe and secure with today's sponsor, Keeper. Look, I've got a lot of passwords to keep track of, and unfortunately not a giant evil lair to keep them all stored in. I'm always scouring weird websites, having accounts on things for fun and work, as well as playing a ton of video games that all require different sets of information. It's a lot of passwords, too much even. So with Keeper Password Manager, I can easily keep track of everything. We've been using Keeper for a good bit now, and their secured, certified, tested, and audited password security platform has been great for day-to-day use. It also works on mobile, so anytime I'm out and about and I want to log into a website, I can do so without having to spend like 20 minutes tabbing between tabs for my list of passwords and mistyping them with my big ol' greasy fingers. Everything gets sorted away behind a single master password, and that's all you'll need to keep everything tight, secure, and filed away. That and Keeper will immediately notify you if one of your passwords has been found on the internet with Breach Watch. And that level of care also extends to other items like credit cards, passports, licenses, and other files. With over 275,000 5-star ratings across various app stores and the title of US News' Best Password Manager of 2023, Keeper is a highly regarded security and encryption service for passwords. So if you're wanting to up the ante on your security without having to juggle passwords on the time, head on over to the link in the description or go to keeper.io/Austin and use the code Austin50 to get 50% off any personal and family plan. That's Austin50 for 50% off today. So, next up, I think we might as well pull out the original Xbox. The first Microsoft console, the nearly 10-pound brick that can be used as a modded paradise or a blunt weapon. The Xbox had a ton of launch titles, some of them awesome, others forgettable, but only one of them was based on a giant green ogre. Like the movie, you know. Did anyone out there play Shrek? I sure hope not. I'll always give licensed games the benefit of the doubt because you know these are typically made under the strictest of schedules and usually the developers do try their best. It didn't matter the company either. In the 90s and 2000s, there was a high chance your studio could just be tossed the shiny popular movie IP and be told, make it work. It's just probably not what you think of when you think of DICE. Yeah, like Battlefield 1942, Mirror's Edge, Midtown Madness 3, DICE. You know, if you never played Midtown Madness 2 sitting in a Gateway store while your parents were bugging some poor college student about specifications on computers, you haven't lived. Anyways, they're responsible for a ton of solid FPS releases over the last several decades, and as a developer, I'd say it's like 95% dubs. However, prior to their breakout hit Battlefield 1942, things were a bit dicey. Shrek, a launch title for the original Xbox, featuring new character designs by Todd McFarlane. I had no idea he did that. But to be fair, it doesn't seem like they want you to know either, considering this thing's been scrubbed off their Wikipedia page. The year 2001 doesn't exist. It can't be that bad, can it? Yeah, okay. Yeah, y'all can scrub that one out. Shrek, also known as Shrekbox, was one of those games both DICE and Microsoft were showcasing, like, yeah, look at the power of our machine. But in 2024, this just looks like a mess. Not to mention the feel. If you cannot tell, Shrek feels like ass. Just a straight up disaster. You wanna run? You're gonna zoom. The base speed is so fast. The platforming and jumping feel terrible. The combo attacks have no momentum or slight lock on when they connect. It's like a yeet button, and then you gotta hope it's pointed in the right direction. Besides that, you can grab people to carry them for a bit, but that only lasts for so long. Meaning if you need to, say, carry Prince Charming to his wife, you have to repeatedly smack him around, pick him up, wait for him to weasel out, rinse, repeat, Shrek. If you distill this whole thing down, it's like the worst Super Mario 64 clone you've ever played. You go stage to stage doing the objectives, which are just called objectives. Usually uninteresting or just doing the things in the level. But also for some reason there's no Donkey. How are you gonna make a Shrek video game without Donkey? I guess Eddie Murphy said no. What do y'all think of when you think of the music of Shrek? Smash Mouth, Joan Jett, how about this? That's the stuff. Shrekbox is a disaster, a commercially successful disaster though, and we've already talked about it a bit. Although last time I wasn't aware they also had an attempt to fix it, to remake it. 2 years later, still by good old Digital Illusions CE, and once again missing from their Wikipedia page would be the enhanced port to the GameCube, Shrek Extra Large. The second chance, the redemption arc, the moment where Shrek could come back from terrible reviews. What do we get? It's even worse? Turns out we were doubting the power of Bill Gates' favorite Fusion Frenzy playing machine because somehow Shrek Extra Large is an even worse version of a bad game. At the time, Shrek was a decent looking title that ran okay, had some fancy lighting, bump mapping, the works from good old DICE. In the transition to the GameCube, all of that had to get ripped to shreds, and what we're left with is uglier models, barely any shadows, and a frame rate that doesn't know the speed limit. Now you get to look at Shrek burping directly into the camera with less polygons. A graphics comparison between the two is pretty hilarious, and it makes you realize just how advanced the Xbox was. But you know what isn't console dependent? The main change to the gameplay, the speed. DICE altered a few elements here and there, like some story beats, as well as an entire level's design, and also Shrek is no longer the fastest thing alive. Look, I'm not gonna say the original's fun, that would be silly, but the ridiculous speed of everything sure was the best aspect. Extra Large tones that down a lot, and what we're left with is just a bad time, no redeeming qualities, and an audioscape that sounds like this. Everyone pour one out for the OG fart boost. All right, so what's like the polar opposite of Shrek? You know, we got a big family-friendly movie with bright CG, lots of funny haha jokes, and a feel-good ending, and I think that the pure opposite side of that spectrum would have to be something like Resident Evil. So let's turn the brightness down, and now we need to figure out what game I'm talking about. And it's not gonna be Operation Raccoon City because we just did that like 2 weeks ago. Generally speaking, Resident Evil, the franchise, has been mostly fantastic. From its campy Jill Sandwich roots to the more modern horror approach, there's hardly any games in Capcom's long-running series that aren't praised. Unless you're one of these. Resident Evil 6? Nah. Although it seems like 6 is going through a bit of a defensive renaissance where people are like, yeah, that one was pretty good actually, to which I say, you're silly. For this video though, we gotta go back a bit further. A game so terrible, people often leave it off ranked lists on the internet because it's being slowly forgotten. Never ported, probably never gonna be either. I'm talking about Resident Evil Survivor. Technically developed by Tosei, not Capcom, who, to be fair, have a bit of a mixed catalog. You've got bangers like the Dragon Quest Monsters series, World of Final Fantasy, and Thousand Arms alongside Dragon Ball GT Final Bout.
What? Am I gonna fight against an old man?
But hey, Capcom still gave the final thumbs up. And that up was towards a concept that should have been a home run. First person light gun Resident Evil. Yes, survival horror had yet to be combined with the light gun genre, unless you count House of the Dead, which you shouldn't, and the idea of crawling around corners and fighting horrifying zombies with a little plastic thing in your hand is incredibly appealing. It just instead played like this. Yep, just hold the gun button down and mash. Also, throw the idea of the light gun out the window, because the American release of this, coming out later than everywhere else, did not support the peripheral. In fact, it was just removed, meaning one of the first off-the-rails light gun games was neutered before release in the States, and what's left is something that just sucks. Also known in Japan as Biohazard Gun Survivor, it was the first of the Gun Survivor series from the 2000s, most of which would get also similarly bad reviews, but why? Simply put, Resident Evil Survivor is it's just really boring. It's a first-person shooter that takes place mostly in tight corridors. You move around with the D-pad while holding R1 to whip out the cursor and shoot zombies or lickers or whatever's moving slowly towards you. There's also a slight auto-aim and infinite ammo, so you can basically mash your way through everything anyways. Now, combine that with your standard Resident Evil level design. You go into a room, find the key, use the key on another door, spot a giant man who can't be easily killed, run away, or get football tackled. But now you can walk up to phones in the first person and experience little bits of entirely nonsensical story dialogue.
Wait, am I Vincent?
They must want this mess taken care of very quickly.
I know that if he goes there, he's going to be killed.
What?
The narrative is a super inconsequential jaunt where you play as an amnesiac who discovers his identity over the course of, 2 hours of slow-paced corridor crawling. Half of the cutscenes are just you arguing with a small child, and combat consists of backing up while firing at a zombie. It's just boring, which is the last thing that you want Resident Evil to be. At the very least, you'll still get a nice dose of that 90s voice acting.
A murderer? What are you talking about? Answer me. Who did I kill?
I guess to say a few nice things, looking at this with a modern emulation's really nice. The textures on the environments look beautiful upscaled and invoke a sense of nostalgia for something that I've never played. The controls aren't the worst either, although it's hard to swallow the fact that we had the light gun ripped away from the US release. It has the right vibe, but no interesting characters, nothing new for the series, and if you were to take the name Resident Evil away from it, Gun Survivor would simply be a thing that exists. A tech demo at best. One where you can't freely look down. Okay, I'm bored now. Next.
I will save these 2 kids. I swear it.
There's a lot of games that come out that don't really give you much to talk about. A lot of those are quickly made licensed titles, games made with the bare minimum of content, or maybe like a 30 to 50 minute long old school NES game. Other times you'll download something off the Xbox 360 marketplace, rest in peace, and be greeted with something so stinky you forgot a developer that you made it. You know who's kind of a sleeper hit, Dev? Saber Interactive. While they haven't always put out the tippest at the top, they've come into their own with some of the stuff they've published, some of it niche for sure. The people who play SnowRunner freaking love SnowRunner. While I may not have fully embraced the trucker sim lifestyle yet, it's inevitable, and although Saber's doing pretty okay these days, back in 2011 they'd release something like Battle Los Angeles for $10 on Xbox Live Arcade. Aren't familiar? That's okay. It's a first-person shooter based on the film of the same name, sitting with a whopping 37 on Rotten Tomatoes, but to be fair, the game's got a 39 on Metacritic, so at least they're in the same ballpark. It's one of those America Hoorah films, except featuring a full-on alien invasion, like Independence Day, except entirely forgettable.
To a police station located here at Venice and Amorosa.
Venice and Amorosa.
Battle Los Angeles, the video game, feels like an advert game. Heck, it's like someone yoinked Duty Calls out of Bulletstorm and tried to make it real, except that was a joke, and this is not. It's an FPS with 3 weapons, which should be alarming enough, but you've got an assault rifle, a sniper, and a rocket launcher. You shoot vaguely humanoid-looking aliens, you read a bunch of static comic panels featuring literal Comic Sans on the screen. And I hope you're ready for exciting dialogue like,
"We got to get those civilians to safety.
This area is heavily guarded. I wonder what they're doing there.
Now move out. There's no time to lose."
Speaking of advert games, I hope you like real dated advertisements in your $10 tie-in licensed movie game. We've got the Sony Ericsson. We've got an ad for Havok, like the physics engine for video games, although I'm not sure there's any examples of physics happening on the screen. Oh, and don't forget hit movie film Green Hornet, now on DVD and Blu-ray. Really just paid money for a series of advertisements, huh? Like a modern WWE show, but totally on par for where publisher Konami was headed in the 2010s. Yeah, Konami. The game itself is just so drab. It clocks in at less than an hour and you're just literally shooting the same enemy over and over. There's a single one. The Sprint copies recently covered Turning Point Fall of Liberty, where the run animation continues as you slow down back to your normal speed. It's incredibly easy, the gunplay's mediocre, and it's got one of the worst jumps in all of gaming. Like it does nothing. You can't jump on anything, it's never required. I did pull off a sick jumping no-scope though. Battle Los Angeles was clearly slapped together in a few months' time, so I can't be too harsh on it, but all I can ask is, who is this for? Well, according to True Achievements and PSN profiles, approximately 10,000 freaks. Get that 100%, y'all, because it doesn't even have a plat. Battle Los Angeles might be a game based on a movie that no one cares about, but what about something that people do care about? Like, say, Ghostbusters. In the 80s and early 90s, Ghostbusters was wildly popular, and it somehow turned into a full-ass franchise, which is something I don't think anyone involved with thought would happen. We had sequels, toys, cartoons. If you haven't seen Extreme Ghostbusters, that's probably okay, but the intro sure says. The mid-90s were awesome. More importantly, it had games, tons of games from the 80s to today, most of which range from mid to this might be one of the worst things I've ever played. While smack dab in the middle of that, in the zone, would be New Ghostbusters 2, developed by HAL Laboratory. Yeah, that HAL, Nintendo's right-hand partner, the creators of Kirby, and a slew of incredible games, HAL. Prior to Sakurai goating the studio up, they'd make all sorts of things, several a year, one of which being New Ghostbusters 2, because Activision already made a worse Ghostbusters 2 game, so they just slapped new on it. This one, it's alright, but more importantly, it's really below what you would expect from HAL, especially these days. New Buster 2 is a top-down action game where you play as two of the 5 Ghostbusters. Yeah, even Lewis. You only control one though, and your partner is an AI doing its best. The AI ain't great. It's mostly a tedious staged-based deal where you run around trapping ghosts, clearing them out, going to the next room, which may look exactly the same to trap more ghosts, rinse repeat till you're done. It feels like you're just going with the motions, a task like navigating a maze in an issue of Highlights as opposed to playing a, video game. The novelty is nice at first, but the repetition kicks in fast, and even though the music by famed Kirby composer Jun Ishikawa slaps, it's not enough to make this more than a bleh time. The difficulty's all over the place. Sometimes it's way too easy. Other times it does the NES haha idiot difficulty and you die within seconds of entering a room. There's no exploration, the bosses are a joke if there's even a boss at the end of the level, and worst of all, it's got no sauce. Famitsu gave this a 25 out of 40 back in the day, and they'd throw out high reviews for anything. Granted, this is way better than Activision and Imagineering's old slop chop of a game, but that's not saying much. There is also a Game Boy version of this, and the experience definitely makes more sense on a handheld. 1990 on consoles, not so much. HAL Labs entered the Kirby dimension 2 years later, and things have been peachy ever since. After all, there are no bad Kirby games. Try me.
We have 3 wonderful...
You know who isn't so stable? Sega. Poor Sega. Back in the day with the Genesis and all the way to the Dreamcast, I truly thought that they could do no wrong. Just hits and bangers all the time. Let's play Zombie Revenge any day of the week. That's at least what a 10-year-old thought, and he probably didn't know what Experts was. Experts, the hot spin-off of Eternal Champion starring the world-famous Shadow Yamato. Back before Sega of Japan decided that having 2 fighting game franchises was stupid, Sega of America was going full in on Eternal Champions. The fighting game was okay. It was one of the more notable Mortal Kombat clones from the era. It replicated the hyper-violence while hovering kinda close to Street Fighter, just with like 30% more jank. Not great, not terrible, but us Sega kids took the slop we were fed and dealt with it. I just wasn't aware they wanted it to be a universe. Enter Experts. Oh my god. Experts on paper is interesting. You're on a secret vigilante mission to stop a group of terrorists from nuking an undersea weapon facility, funded by none other than the United Nations, which means it's probably not a secret group of vigilantes, but that's the best the world has to offer. Explosive 3D graphics, play all 3 experts at the same time. We've got Shadow, the assassin. We've got Zachary all stanced up with arms that hang lower than his knees, and we've got Tashiel, who I can only refer to as a skinny legend. Don't worry, you're not gonna forget their names.
Zach in combat. Zach report. Combat complete.
Hey man, all this voiceover is impressive for something coming out all the way back in 1996. Oh, that's kind of late actually. Imagine Christmas rolls around, it's 96 and your friend gets a Nintendo 64, a brand new spanking copy of Mario 64. Meanwhile, you open the Mario-shaped box to find experts. Freaking experts! This kind of plays like the Lost Vikings, except they can't be on screen with each other at any point. You also have no differences between the characters, so it's just moving them from point A to B to do whatever the time-based objective is, and well, that's it. 2 whole freaking hours of the same map, moving left and right, dealing with a stupid menu layout and hearing these 3 characters' names over and over. It's not like it's hard either. Everything's clearly marked for you to do, and the enemy AI is a total joke. I sat here trying to die just to see what would happen for what felt like 5 minutes and the dude kept missing. How are you gonna keep missing me, homie? Don't forget about boss fights. I think experts did though, considering there are none. I don't know what Sega were thinking with this one, but it got heavily panned out of the gate in just about every regard. They clearly were trying to push the tech aspect with this, considering the extreme vibe and the ridiculous faux 3D sprite work, but what we're left with is something that looks and feels so bad, it's amazing it actually got released. Yeah, this isn't a prototype, you could buy this. Easily, one of the worst games I've played on the channel, one of the worst released on the Sega Genesis, and worst official first-party Sega games. It's also a great thing to force people to play at a party. Try it.
What did it look like? I don't know. It was like, all cool and stuff.
Keeping it Sega a tiny bit longer, we as a global society shouldn't forget about Sonic Chronicles: The Dark Brotherhood. However, it seems we're destined to, considering the emulation for this one doesn't want to work properly. Sonic Chronicles was a joint effort by Sega and BioWare that started prior to EA buying them, so the name was still a top tier one. When I heard they were making a Sonic the Hedgehog RPG, I couldn't help but get excited. I was fresh off of playing Mass Effect 1. I loved Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic. This was gonna be the best. Unfortunately, what we got is something unfinished that's aged horribly with time. The story, nonsense. The music, listen for yourself. Look, the DS doesn't have the best music chip out there, but come on. There's a whole slew of stories with this one. Music allegedly being pulled for legal reasons, the tracks being converted MIDIs that didn't get finished. On top of that, we got lawsuits, plagiarism accusations by longtime Archie writer Kim Penders, and mid to low reviews across the board. But more importantly than that, for me, the emulation crashes during the first PAL tutorial, so I couldn't play more than 10 minutes, and I'm not gonna buy a DS recording setup just to play Sonic Chronicles. Nor should anyone. One day this thing will work on modern emulation setups, but that is not this day. Sonic Chronicles is a bad game from both Sega and BioWare, and we'll get to it in the future. Just hopefully not the future with breastfeeding echidnas. Speaking of, I wonder what midi-chlorians taste like. And by that I mean it's time to talk about our last game of the day, Star Wars. This franchise has been through the ringer. It's had bad games, it's had great titles, and all sorts of developers, good and bad, giving it a shot. In fact, in the 90s and 2000s, so many of them were giving it a shot that you might be surprised to find out who did what. Although generally, LucasArts themselves was in charge. However, for this, we need to go right back to when they decided to make it all convoluted. May 1999, the release of Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. Star Wars video games have typically done well for themselves. Normally, a licensed type of deal is the utter bottom of the barrel, but good old LucasArts being in charge of themselves went without major catastrophe for a majority of the time. Mostly because Flight of the Falcon wasn't even them, aka the quickest way to force motion sickness and be bedridden for the rest of the day. I, like a lot of others, have played quite a few Star Wars tie-ins. It's always been a staple of every console generation, your Super Star Wars, X-Wings, Shadows of the Empires, and Force Unleashed. However, things got a bit wild when The Phantom Menace came out. A new film meant it was time for a new line of, well, everything. Toys, school supplies, books, new plastic things to whack your friends with. Real ones like me had a Darth Maul poster in their bedroom. Yo, this is basically through Wolf Moon. The Phantom Menace had a ton of video games come out around it, which also unfortunately meant that the bar of quality would begin to slip. Sure, Episode 1 Racer and Battle for Naboo are fun and hold up today, just not so much for Episode 1 Jedi Power Battles. Welcome to Jedi Power Battles for the PlayStation 1 and/or Dreamcast, also known as the hardest game you've ever played in your life. Picture, if you would, a side-scrolling beat-em-up featuring cool Jedi like Obi-Wan Kenobi, Qui-Gon Jinn, and Adi Gallia? Who's Plo Koon again? Yeah, I don't remember this at all. Apparently, he's like the coolest dude of all time. He discovered Ahsoka, treated all clones with reverence and individuality, and could even best Yoda in a duel. That's pretty cool. Unfortunately, none of that's gonna help him make it through this. Yeah, I paused to get to my notes immediately. Jedi Power Battles is what happens when you have a bona fide 10 out of 10 concept and throw it down the toilet. A 2-player co-op beat 'em up with Space Samurai should be a slam dunk, but for some reason, everything feels terrible. The controls teeter on tank controls where you can't just press the stick to move. They've got to shift and slowly spin around, which doesn't work with, precision platforming. Combos are all very stiff, and even though you unlock new strands as you level up, none of them feel fluid enough to have a proper ebb and flow. Each of the Jedi have a different force ability, which ranges from quick AoE to do damage to quick AoE to do damage. I like how they give you the ability to parry battle droid shots, but their aim is so quick and bad that you won't block the correct shot. Like, come on. Yet at the same time, these dudes are way too strong. Okay, what do y'all think of this? That's wrong. Rule number 1, a battle droid can't block a lightsaber with its arm. Literally everyone knows this. Freaking Jar Jar Binks led an army of fish people against these dudes, and they were all using a mix of sticks and blasters. How's one of these little guys gonna block Qui-Gon Jinn? Especially when he's got his beat 'em up power-ups like a longer lightsaber. It's bigger. You can tell they did this before writing the lore because Mace Windu has a blue lightsaber. Yep. The main problem with Jedi Power Battles is definitely the absurd difficulty though. You only get a handful of credits for each mission, and any death's gonna throw you back to the beginning, or in a very rare case, a checkpoint. Also, it is way too easy to die. I mean, one wrong jump or knock off the edge and boom, you're back to the start faster than you can parse what happened. These stages are long too. It'll feel like you've played 4 or 5 normal Streets of Rage levels in the time it takes you to do one. Oh, you know what'll spice up the beat 'em up formula? An escort mission featuring Baby Annie. This little kid can take more hits than the player, by the way. Good stuff. Granted, it is co-op, and I'm sure that takes this from like a 3 to a 4 tops, but when compared to any number of beat-em-ups or even other LucasArts games from the time, Power Battles is bottom tier. It's way too hard. The controls feel like you're running through molasses, and even when you use the lock-on feature, sometimes the AI will get you trapped in a pattern. Like, yeah, keep dodging, bro. I'm just gonna blast. When all is said and done, and you're at the end of the game throwing down against the big bad Darth Maul, make sure not to accidentally step off the sides of the map and be teleported in a single frame back to the start.
That won't be necessary.
Oh, but it is!
Look, I will love an entire gauntlet of LucasArts games. I'm sure I loved this as a kid when I had opinions like, I don't like bread crust, it offends me. But nowadays, avoid, avoid, avoid. Someone really needs to try again with the Star Wars side-scrolling beat-em-up concept though. Give it the Tribute games or something, they rule. Now, play us out, Tusken Raiders. And there we have it, a bunch of bad games by generally good game developers. You wanna argue about Sonic Chronicles? Sure, just Tell me when the emulation works. I actually came up with like a massive list of games for this, but I decided to cut it back a bit so I could talk more in depth about the individual ones. So if you want to see more things like this, let me know down below. And if you have any suggestions, let me know. I'm always looking to tackle things good or bad, and what's terrible to someone might be a hidden treasure to somebody else. If you liked today's video, please check out the sponsor, Keeper, or if you want to support the channel directly, you can head over to my Patreon. All backers get access to the community Discord, where we've got hangouts, lots of chats, and too many silly opinions. Visit the Pixel Empire if you want to buy one of our t-shirts, and also it turns out I'm not a Jacko kind of guy, but maybe Potemkin? Only people who saw the end of the video are gonna know what I'm talking about. Who could have guessed I would have liked full screen punching? So I've been Austin, and catch me next time when we're like 3 or 4 weeks late to the Deadpool and Wolverine train because I saw the movie, can't stop thinking about it, and had a thing I needed to say about something else entirely. Haha. Thank you all so much for watching. Special Patreon shout out to Aaron Kwolek, Bennett Oswald, Blackfoot Ferret, Blake Thomas, Charles Rosner, Cheeks, Chris Shelton, DX Buster, Dylan Snyder, Hey Quiggles, Idlevice, Jay Roos, Jacoby Fitzpatrick, Kevin Sanowski, Platinum Rose, Hotcha Bear, Randall Bentley, Rare Find It, Ryan Talbert, and Vox. Thank you so much for your generous support. I hope you all liked the video. I wanted to spend a little more time on individual games, and this is something I think I could make a lot of. I kind of feel like I've been hammering through video games lately and not giving them enough attention, you know? So I'm gonna try to take it down a notch, see how that works out. Let me know what you think. I'm going to go do a triple backflip because I can. Bye bye.